Hey guys, welcome to the Mom Show. I'm your host, Courtney Doyle, and this is a place I am giving you permission to not have it all together. Welcome back to the show. Today, my guest and I talk all things parenting in this digital age. We talk about when is it appropriate for our kids to have a device? How do we prepare ourselves before we just hand them one of these devices that then accesses the whole world? What can we do as moms in preparation before we make that decision? Because technology is not going away, and we have to be on top of it as moms. How do we have that conversation with our kids? How do we make the right choice? Today's guest has done the research. She's got great wisdom and tips and tools for us to use. And so without further ado, here's my guest, Jenna. Hey guys, welcome back to the show. This season is Help My Child. And I have a wonderful guest for you that's going to bring a lot of encouragement and a lot of wisdom that I think as moms we really need to hear. And so, Jenna, I want to turn the mic over to you immediately. Tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, your family, and can you fill in that blank for me? Help my child. Let's go.
Yeah, thanks, Courtney. So I'm Jenna Kruse, and I am a mom and a wife. I have three kiddos. They are all school aged. So the oldest is 14, a boy, and then I have two girls, one who's a preteen, and then an elementary aged daughter. So I've got like one in each season of schooling. And man, next year I'm going to have a high school, a middle school, and an elementary all at once.
Yeah.
So my backstory is that I spent my entire adulthood at a very young age mentoring teenagers. I started out working at a boys and girls club and coached in a public school setting, and then volunteered as a youth leader in various ministries, and just have been walking alongside young people my entire life. And now that I'm raising my own kids to hopefully know and love Jesus, I just have found that parenting in the digital age has complicated things a little bit. I don't know if you listeners out there can relate. And so it just became a thing where I was the mom willing to talk about the hard thing. And so I just started showing up at moms groups and, hey, let's chat about this. And we'll get more into that in a minute. But there
Mhm.
were just some hard stories that I walked alongside some teenagers. And then as my own kids started seasoning into having technology part of their everyday life, it's like the stats start to creep into your own everyday life. And we need community to know how to do it.
Mhm. Oh, absolutely. It's a totally different world, and when I have conversations, so my children range from 12 to 31. And so just in the time frame that I've been having children and seeing the shift has been unbelievable. And so it's interesting when I talk to some of the younger kids and the older kids are there and we start talking about what technology did they have. Or then whenever they start asking questions of me and they're like, wait, what do you mean? Like you left home and your parents couldn't track you or that you couldn't call from your phone. What do you mean you had to stop and hope you had a quarter to use a payphone or whatever?
Yeah.
They're mind blown. They're mind
Yeah.
blown. It's I
Yeah.
lived back with Fred Flintstone or something.
And then being a parent with that wide of an age range, I was just talking to a mom recently too. I think we parents, I call myself an 80s baby. And so we sort of lament in what it was like when we were growing up. And it's so different for what our kids are growing up in. Someone like you're like, I even parented. I had a version of parenthood that looked very different than it does my olders versus like my younger kids. And so I
Mhm.
can imagine that can be hard. And so I guess my help statement is help. I'm parenting in the digital age and I fear that it's ruining them. And I
Mhm.
hear so many different versions of what that help statement could look like. From the parenting perspective, it's more like help. I feel constantly frustrated. I feel like I don't have control over my house. I don't know how to navigate all of these decisions. And so there it comes with a whole host of mom emotions for sure. And so I like to get into that as much as I get into what it's like for our kiddos, because we signed up to help our kids navigate this and become responsible citizens in the world. But we're going through it too. And we have our whole
Mhm.
experience just navigating, like feeling helpless, feeling hopeless, feeling fatigued from just the constant decision making that we make on a daily basis. regarding every little tech decision. And then help, my kids are navigating scary things online. And so I'll get into that a little bit, but it kind of started out when pre-kids, I was working at the Boys and Girls Club and doing some various ministries. And there was, for example, there was a teenage girl who her parents had really good intentions and they were tracking her on Life 360. And we found out later, because I was friends with the mom and her story didn't add up, that she had been smart enough to take her phone where her mom thought she was supposed to be so that Life 360 could track her there, and then dropped it off and hopped back in the car with her friend. And she was supposed to be at a youth group. And it was just like at the end of the day, when she didn't know what the topic was that night at youth group, it was like, well, wait a minute. She wasn't even there. The Bible says keep no record of wrongs. But in that case, I'm like, okay, I'm going to jot this one down for the future. So I have it for reference when my kids get to that age. And now they're there. And we've experienced some ugly things where probably came to a head when my son was in 6th grade and my daughter was in 4th grade, and several stories just coming home. We live in an affluent area, and so it just comes with the territory that kids have devices at earlier ages. And so my 4th grade daughter at the time came home and was talking about how two of her friends were bragging about, and I'm not going to mention the website. I don't want to give it its due time, but they were on a website where it was like meant for photo sharing, and they had like real people on the internet were asking them for nudes. And these girls thought it was hilarious
In the
because they're
4th grade.
yes, and they said they sent pictures of the cracks in their elbow or the cracks in their knee to be like, haha, look, it looks like I sent something, but I really didn't. And having to have those parent conversations. And then my 6th grade son comes home and says, like, at this point, he didn't have a phone yet, but a lot of his friends did around the middle school lunch table. And one of the friends whispered to the other friend, hey, go look up blah, blah.com, which happens to be a hub for pornography. And they did it. They knew how to toggle off of the school's internet, which would have had the filter on there to prevent that, and get around it and just snicker about what they were seeing. And having these parent phone calls just helped remind me that, man, we're all in this together and we all need help navigating this. We need to be in community. And so I was willing to have those hard conversations. But I also felt like a lot of parents fall into two different extremes where it's either they're scared silly and no, delay, don't like forever, where they're like late high school and don't have the tools they need to navigate it. And then on the other hand, just almost like throwing in the towel and giving up and just saying, this is the way it is. And my kid's going to have the same tech that I have as an adult.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very scary. We have a 6th grader. And so I can tell you, compared to conversations that I had, even I would say, even so much so with even the 20-year-old who is the next child above him, the conversations that I have had to have with him at a younger age are exponentially greater than the conversations I had with any of the other 5 children at this age. It's not conversations I didn't have. It's just when I compare it to, was I having these conversations with 10-year-olds when the 31-year-old was 10, or even the 20-year-old was 10? And the answer to that is no. And a good reason behind that is because of the access that he has had, or his friends on the school bus, or like you said, at the lunch table, or whatever it may be, the access that they have had. And so it's a different world that we are living in. And like you said, I think that either extreme is really dangerous, because I feel like if we are like, no, I'm going to put them in a bubble and I'm never going to let them have a phone and they're never going to have Wi-Fi and all of those things, we know that's not realistic, because they're being given devices. If you don't have a device, they're being given devices at school.
Yeah.
And so there are ways around it. And what are you going to do? Prevent them from being around other children? Because you're potentially going to be the mom that's, I'm wrapping them in bubble wrap and they're never ever going to see this. And they sit on a school bus or they sit in a classroom next to the friend whose parents are like, I give up. I really don't care. You're going to learn it anyway. And I don't have time. And you may as well learn it off the internet. Or this would never happen to my child. My child promises that they're only going to good websites. They're only playing games on their phone. They're only texting appropriately. And so my child would never. I think that is a big misconception. And it is a lie that we tend to believe. I have
Yeah,
been there. I think all parents, we want to live in that space. It feels like we've done a good job. So my child would never go to those websites. My child would never say those things. My child would never send pictures because you think you've done a good enough job. And this isn't about the job that you've done. This is about the pressures that they're experiencing
definitely.
from outside. And so let's jump into that. Like you said, there's this two extreme. I don't want my child to have any technology, period, end of story, or I'm okay with it. When we talk about that, let's jump into what age are you in the research that I know that you have done? Where is there a sweet spot in this, Jenna?
Yeah. Yeah, so I love that you brought up just the idea of conversation because even though it could be considered a lament that you've had to talk to your son about things earlier than maybe some of your older kids because they've been exposed. I like to turn it on its head to a lot of parents who feel hopeless because I, if you believe the gospel, we believe that everything is redeemable by God, everything. And so if you find out that your kid has encountered something or come across something, been exposed, and it feels that was taken from them or from you, it's still redeemable by God. And I think the best part about it is that you can have a really awesome conversation with your kid. And I think that in some ways, it's allowed my kids and I to grow closer because we talk about things that maybe wouldn't otherwise get brought up in conversation because it's bombarding us from all around. So we're like, okay, so I guess we're having that conversation. And it's a beautiful thing to just get real with them. And I think number one is having a conversational approach to parenting is so important above coming up with, okay, this is the specific age that everyone should be when they get this privilege or that privilege. And so I rely more on a driver's ed approach to technology and coach parents through that. And so what that looks like is, let's say my 14-year-old is making a bowl of cereal and he opens the fridge and realizes there's no milk. And I'm like, and he starts complaining. And I'm like, hey, I throw him the keys. I'm like, hey, why don't you go to the store and go grab a gallon of milk since you're complaining about it? As we know, that would not be a smart decision on my behalf because he's not developmentally ready for that milestone. And there's a few things to consider when you talk about what's the right age to get a phone, what's the right age to have access to an iPad or social media or all of those different decisions. And it starts with when it comes to driver's ed, right? There's a law like you have to be 16 to drive and you have to be 15 to, at least in the state of Indiana, to get your learner's permit. And it works up incrementally. But even beyond that, I think it would be crazy for a parent to just automatically assume, they're 16 and that's what the law says. So I have to sign them up today and I have to
Mhm.
put them behind the wheel today. And so it really comes down to, where is your child at? Are they showing signs of maturity? And then beyond that, like maybe even more importantly is am I ready? Am I ready as the parent to handle that? Because it is a part-time job. And it would be no different than buying your child a bicycle when they're 5 and saying, maybe someday I'll get around to buying the helmet, right? Like you have to be ready to go full in with them and saying, okay, we're going to walk hand in hand. We're going to walk side by side and figure this thing out together. And so I have all kinds of resources in like my digital parent talk community where it helps them. What are those incremental steps? And also what are the tools to help safeguard them? But really it boils down to having that conversational approach. It's the biggest safeguard out there because no matter how many other things you try, filtering apps, I have a funny story with that one. That's my claim to fame, if you will. But we tried lots of different filtering apps. We're currently on our 4th brand of figuring out, okay, maybe this one will do what we were hoping for it to do. And it was the 3rd one that I was like, I'm like, just going to test this out because the first one was just the setup was really difficult and I got lost in it. I remember then when we tried a different filtering app, it was like slowing down all of the devices. I'm like, I can't even work with this thing. It's just slowing down my computer and I need to work.
Mhm.
And with the 3rd one, I was like, okay, it offered like 2 different filter settings. You could either do just nudes to block those out, or you could block out even anything that kind of looked like someone was wearing lingerie or was trying to be more adult content. And so I clicked it, I toggled it to that and set it all up properly. put it on all of our family's devices. And then I told my family what I was doing because, by now they probably are like, this is just mom. This is her being her crazy self. I was like, I'm going to test it out. So I get down into my bra and panties and I proceed to take a selfie of myself. But I'm like, okay, I got to make the ugliest face possible because I feel really awkward doing this, and sent it off to the family iPad. And it went right through. Like, it didn't flag it. It didn't stop it. Nothing. I think it just goes to show that, hey, there's so many ways around the filtering apps that can be supplemental to our game plan, and it should be, and it's important. But it's definitely supplemental to the main thing, which is having a great relationship with your kids and knowing that nothing is off limits for them to talk about. And that can be
Mhm.
hard to do, right? Because like I can definitely be in freak out mode pretty easily
I'm
around here.
sure.
But I do think that a lot of times when it comes to the big stuff, I like can remove myself from the situation. Okay, Jenna, this is your moment. Don't mess it up.
Yeah.
Take a pause and handle it
Mhm.
with grace.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. We've had situations where when just yesterday, as a matter of fact, my 12-year-old came in and I had been working all day and I actually had a little bit of a headache from sitting in front of the computer. And he walked in and he had a question. And I just was like, not right now, bud. And he was like, "No," and I said, can you give me just about 15 minutes?" I've been telling my kids since they were little that I need to recharge my battery. That's how I would nap when they were little and I was exhausted. Mom has a battery and she has to recharge it. And so I just said, can you give me a minute? And we will circle back to that when I'm not struggling with a headache. And sometimes it's to buy me time for dad to get home or for me to call dad and go, "Hey, this was the latest question. And maybe it's something that needs to come from dad and not come from mom. And so I need you to address that with him or whatever." And we do. It's remembering to go back to that, not to just blow them off. Because if you don't answer their questions, somebody else will. Somebody
Mhm.
will give them the answers that they're desiring. And I love what you said about using it like a driver's ed approach. That's great advice. And it's so true. Just because my kiddos turned 16, I didn't give them. We do have specific parameters around getting a driver's license and getting a vehicle. And it's not just, well, you have to make a certain grade or you have to do this or that. It's a combination of things. And it's a combination of, are you ready to be responsible? But I will also agree with you as the parent, you there's like a whole other level of knowing technology when it comes to this is not about, "Oh, I'm really good on my computer, or I'm really good on my iPhone for my personal use," because I do not find that any of that has been set up to be super simple to safeguard our children. Sometimes I am laying in bed at night because his phone has to be turned in to my room, and so I go through it every night or every other night, and I'm looking at things, and I'm like, "Okay, this is toggled on, this is toggled off. Oh, there now this in figuring out the downtime. When does it turn on? When does it turn off? Setting limits. It takes a minute for you to figure all of that out. So I love that you're advising, make sure you have figured out how to safeguard them before you just throw them in the car and say, "Hey, good luck." Make
Mhm.
sure you've done the work, and it takes some time, it really does, and it's evolving. It's
Mhm.
ever changing. They this morning, I got a notification that my phone wants to update, and my phone's been acting weird, and my husband was like, "Oh, he has to update his for his work immediately." And he was like, "Oh, you haven't updated yet?" And my response was, "No," because I am certain there are things that are probably being turned on once I update, like locations or just different things that I don't want turned on, and I haven't had the time to figure out what is this new update sending to my phone that I'm gonna have to safeguard myself and ultimately
Yeah.
our youngest from. Now, do you have any statistics though? Let's talk about what technology is
Yeah.
doing to our children. Can you share some of those statistics with us?
Yeah, definitely. I can become pretty impassioned by really anything, like a cross between a 2 and an 8 on the Enneagram. So I'm like a helper, but it's motivated by a little feistiness. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to talk to this MOPS group. I got to figure out the statistics. And so I watched a documentary called Childhood 2.0, which it's probably a little dated now, but, and you got to be careful with anything that when you do the research, it's just like Googling something when you have a mole on your arm and you're like, don't Google too much, right? Because it can
Yeah.
have like a little bit of fear bait tendency to it as well. But so There's a guy I follow on Instagram named Chris. He runs an organization called Protect Young Eyes. And so he was interviewed on this documentary and he mentioned that one fourth, and this was probably even a couple of years ago and probably has changed. And AI is probably going to further just bombard the internet in this particular area. But he said one fourth of the internet is X rated. And I was like, okay. And then here's what really threw me. So he said that would, let's say, if you just put a phone in a child's pocket, it's putting the world in their pocket. So he's like, when you do that and you don't have a plan for how you're going to be intentional with it and how you're going to walk alongside them to a place of safety, he said it's like putting 4 magazines on your coffee room table in your family room. And one of them is a pornographic magazine. And just setting them there and saying, oh, ignore that one. Just read the other 3 to your kids. Like you would never do that, right? It makes it sound
Right.
ridiculous. But that's what you're doing. And so it puts it into perspective. Most people have heard the stat that age 8 is the average age that a child is seeing their first inappropriate image or video online, mostly accidental. And so it's like our kids want to do the right thing, but they're set up for failure. And I think a lot of times it's meant to be that way. That industry so we did a lot of research back when I worked at the Boys and Girls Club. We had this organization that helped us fight the big tobacco companies. And it was shown that they were advertising specifically to people under 18, the tobacco companies were. And it's no different with the explicit content. These organizations, these companies know that if they get kids hooked early, man, they have a fan for life, right? And so a customer for life, they'll be in the middle of YouTube and all of a sudden it's, what just happened? We looked up something very kid friendly and it's not like you're even scrolling too far. I talked to parent after parent who says, oh my gosh, I was just the other day, we were looking something up for school and what do you know? This popped up. And so it's just so prevalent and easy to come across. You were talking about just taking a pause before you talk to your kids. And so something that I really advocate for is having fun with it. Like those stats are really hard and those can really discourage us as parents. But my backstory is that, so I was a camp counselor at a Christian summer camp, overnight camp, and I had to give my first campfire devotion. And this is back early 2000s. And I was like, I don't want to use they gave us a binder, like, here, you can just follow this script if you're nervous. And I was like, no, I'm too creative for that. I'm not going to do that. Finding Nemo had recently come out like just the year prior. And it was like, okay, how can I explain the gospel in a way that is captivating to these like 100 youth campers around a campfire? And so I used the story of Finding Nemo and how he was the prodigal son and he went to touch the butt with just the boat up at the surface. And it really like these kids heard the gospel in a way they had never heard before. And I like to use technology. My parents did the same thing. And I don't think I realized it at the time. They weren't always like off limits. No, if you remember the show Party of Five, it was like maybe real early 2000s as well. And I was a teenager then and I had a teenage sister as well who was 2 years older than me. And my parents very easily could have looked up the show and said, oh no, like we're not going to go there. It dealt with taboo topics like teen pregnancy and like drinking and driving and all kinds of things. These were teenagers raising themselves. That was the storyline. And rather than say no, they sat down on the family room couch with us. And I think that was one of the most strategic things that my parents could have done because essentially, rather than using control over us, they were using influence and discipleship, essentially over a TV screen. And so that's become my passion is like, how can you turn this thing that feels like it's hopeless, that feels like my kids are doomed, help, my kids are doomed. But we really have the upper hand here, right? Like we're living out the gospel every day. And so we just have to realize that anything that our kids are coming across is an opportunity. It's an opportunity to go deeper. And it can also be a catalyst to sharing the greatest message ever, which is that in Christ, all things are redeemed. And I just would ask people who are listening in to consider what it might look like to have hope for your family and to come with confidence and say, sometimes I get like totally blindsided by something my child brings to me in conversation, but consider it a privilege. And it's one more way to show them that you are open to talking about whatever hard thing is on their mind.
Through this podcast, I've been able to, of course, interview a lot of moms, and a lot of have said there were topics that they could not talk about at home and how they wished they had, and that they're parenting and attempting to parent different with a more open communication. Actually, just the coming up in the month of May, and this will air after that one, where it's a whole month on mental illness and depression and suicidal ideations. And the three moms that I interview, one of the key components to them knowing that their child was suicidal was communication,
Oh,
and was knowing, wait, something's off with our communication, something's not right with this child, and asking the hard questions and having conversations about it. And I do think that has evolved from parents back in the day. I'll go back to my parents. There was a lot of topics that my mom just, that was not something she was going to talk to me about. It was almost like it was inappropriate. Like, it's inappropriate for us to talk about those things. And now, because of what our children are being faced with, there is no topic that is inappropriate for you to be talking to your child about. And that statistic is mind-blowing, that a fourth of the internet is X-rated. And like you said, but we are giving these children devices. Look, I'm guilty. My son has a phone, and part of the reason why he got a phone when he did was because of where we lived. And we've actually, after the fact, thought, probably should have done a landline. Like, this would have been, there were better options. But again, let's talk to the mom who's saying, "Okay, look, I hear y'all. It's X-rated. I don't want my kids seeing bad things. I communicate with my children, and I feel so pressured because everyone is doing it, right?
yeah.
The kid is coming home, everybody's got a phone." Let's talk to that mom who is just at her wits' end because she's hearing it every day from the kid that everybody has it. She's hearing it from her own friends, right? "Oh, we gave our kid a phone," or whatever. How do we battle that, Jenna? This everyone's doing it mentality.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I was recently, I follow a fellow mom who's in the same digital parenting space. And I had to laugh because she has a teenage daughter and her message is more along the lines of specifically delay is the way, which in some ways I'm like, maybe I need to backtrack and turn around. I also have a preteen and a teen with a smartphone, but I'll get to that as well here in a second. But she had such a strict rule that was so specific that even when her daughter got into sewing and was making sewing reels, but her sewing machine is in her room, and her whatever device she was going to use to record it isn't allowed in her room. She had to leave the device at the door and still sew from afar. And I was just like, okay, now we're getting to be a little legalistic. Like, we got to
Mhm.
meet our kids where they are. So, kind of a case in point for my family was when my oldest and we were navigating this whole thing. Like, okay, most people already have a phone. What are we going to do with our son and not be completely ostracized? And this Chris from Protect Young Eyes, he calls it how to make a smartphone a dumb phone. And I love that because, and so we had to do some research, but my husband loves a certain technology company that has a fruit on the front. And he's just a techie anyways. And so I was like, I'm not okay with this. I'm not ready for this. But it seemed like a big deal to my child that that logo was on the phone. Like, these kid
Of
phones
course.
wasn't doing it for him. And so we did some research. I was like, the only way I'm willing to do this is if we figure out how to take the internet off the phone. Like, it will have access to Wi-Fi, but it will not have a search engine. And so there's a way to do that. And it's actually really simple. But we just had to figure that out. We had to do the research and say, type in how to take Safari off the iPhone. It's not a once and done thing. That doesn't prevent everything, right? Because there's still text messaging and there's still friends who can screen record something and send it to your child and all of that. But it is one major step to take a large portion of the doom scrolling and accidentally seeing something and then going down a slippery slope and that kind of thing. So that's one thing that we did for sure. And then I also want to say it's never too late to turn back. I've had to tell a lot of parents that because um, one of the parents, when I had to call her up and be like, okay, this is what I heard. You hate these conversations, but it takes a village to raise a child. So I come with that mentality, not from a place of judgment. If I have to make a phone call to a parent to say, this is what I heard is happening, bus ride conversation, whatever it is, But this one particular parent, she just wrecked me emotionally because it was like she was trying to wrap her brain around what had happened with her daughter. And it was that story from earlier, getting on that website that was like a photo sharing adult website. And she said, we used the filtering app and we did this and we did that. And it was like her parenting partner had made decisions that she was like, it was too fast, too soon. And it felt like she was lamenting in a way that felt like she didn't know she could turn back. She didn't know that that just like we need to apologize to our kids at times, they also need to know that we're human too. We're figuring it out one day at a time. When our kid turns 14 years old, guess what? We're parenting a 14-year-old for the first time ever. And so
Mhm.
we're new to this as well. And so we have to be able to tell our kids, like, hey, I know that I said yes to this, but I'm realizing that maybe you're not ready or you're not showing signs of readiness. And we use the Bible verse Luke 16:10 a lot, which talks about to much has been given, much is asked. And to those, when you show to be faithful in the little things, you can be faithful in much. And I think my kids can roll their eyes through that verse and finish it for me because they've heard it so much, that with responsibility comes privilege. And so just realizing that it's an everyday situation. At a bare minimum, we reevaluate some of the bigger things on a 6-month basis. We have
Mhm.
contracts with each of our kids when they get their devices and try to be intentional with that so they know ahead of time are my rules, and it's spelled out in plain English. And it can be even the simple stuff too. Hey, when we're on a drive in town and your mom is nice enough to chauffeur you around to basketball practice or whatever, it'd be really nice if we could talk for that 5 minutes instead of scrolling your phone, that kind of thing. But yeah, I'm a lot of times penciling things into the contract. I'm like, hey, show me your contract. I need to add some things to it. But they're part of it too. They get to make some decisions. What would you want to have on the contract? What do you think is on this contract that's really bothersome for you? And can we talk about that? And maybe we can come up with a compromise.
Mhm. I like that. We've done just a family rule where because there's so many of them, we have 6. I don't know if I'd mentioned that to you. I know the listeners know that. They hear me talk about them all the time. But where with big things, it's a family vote. And so, like when we started considering giving him a cell phone, the other 5 siblings had to buy in on it. And we talked to them about it. Now, I do have to admit, it is super helpful to have the older kids who look, these kids are adults now. Their identity is, they know who their identity lies in. But they can have great conversations with their mom who didn't grow up with Snapchat. And so I can say, okay, tell me about this. Everybody has it, all these things. And they are such a great resource to
Yeah.
say, absolutely not, or no, this game is appropriate, or whatever it may be. And I think what you're saying, as far as having to make a hard phone call to a mom, we need to be prepared to take the phone call and we need to be okay with welcoming the phone call because
Mhm.
it does take a village and we are a community of people. And though this technology has taken us from where I feel like our faces and our minds are with others to self and to what's happening on a device, in these situations, it's so important for us to have that community of friends around us and be willing to listen to it. And we can't be offended when somebody calls and goes, little Johnny was doing X, Y, and Z. We have to be prepared to say, okay, I'm going to address this. And I'm so thankful that somebody else saw it and called attention to it. And the same thing if you are in a church environment or a group environment and there are maybe some teenage kiddos that their parents are doing well, they are making good choices. That would not be a bad resource for a younger mom with younger kids to have. Like you've got your 14-year-old and he's the test dummy right now, but he's going to be a wealth of knowledge when it comes to answers for the younger one because he is now going to be ingrained in it and he's going to see how things evolve. And that's what I've been able to do with my older kids. Hey, tell me about this. Is this safe? Is there a safe way to do it? And they're really quick to say, absolutely not. Or they may see something that I would have otherwise not seen. And I think building that community around you is so vital because we can't be everywhere all the time.
Yeah.
And it's important for others to know our children and to get to know our children. Now, let's shift to the tools.
Yeah.
You've talked about third party monitoring tools. We have one that I've been using for a couple of months now. I'm really enjoying it, but you talked about your funny story of sending yourself in your bra and panties. I get alerted to all the different settings, right? So if I say I want to be alerted to bullying or to medical awareness or whatever. And so a couple of months ago, shortly after I had put this on his phone and on our home devices, I got a warning that there was medical content. And I was like, okay, that's weird. And so I went into it and it was a friend in a group text message that said, I think I broke my hand. And so it alerted me and I was like, okay. And then I get an alert to bullying. And I was like, oh, who is bullying my baby? And I read it and Jenna, I died laughing. I have a mom group that comes to my house on Wednesday nights. And while we're in mom group, I'll let him go upstairs and play on his PlayStation. And I looked at the time and I knew that it was time for him to come down from playing. And so I sent him a text message and I was like, hey, time to turn it off and come down. The ladies, they had been there longer than normal. So I was like, the ladies are still here. So don't come down and be a turd. And it could flagged that I was bullying my own child because I was calling him a turd. And when it first came up, my heart dropped like, oh, somebody's bullying my baby. And then when I read the text messages, I was like, oh, your mother is bullying you. And so we got a great laugh out of it. I'm thankful for it. I'm thankful that it's catching things, even though some of them have been comical or not so serious. But
Yeah.
I can't rely on that third party to alert me to everything, of course.
Definitely.
And so tools where we can find balance. What are some suggestions that you have to find balance in this digital age?
Yeah. First off, you might need to tell us specifically what that tool is. I don't know. You're probably not getting like any commission for it, but it's
No, I'm not. It's actually Bark,
okay.
BARK.
Yeah.
And
And that's one I've heard really good things about, and actually one that we have not tried. And so ours is definitely a little bit more basic as far as just the basic content, not flagging for bullying or medical related things.
yeah. And since we're talking about it, because I did share it on my social media last week and I am not getting any kind of commission on it, but it's on my phone, it's on his phone, it's on my computer, and then you can go in and say, "Okay, connect this technology." So right now there's a lot of things that he doesn't have on his phone, but let's say he had Snapchat, you could connect his Snapchat. You tell it all that you want it to monitor, and it
Yeah.
monitors those things, and then they sent me a device that I put on my Wi-Fi as well that can monitor the Wi-Fi in the home.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
I've been impressed. So far, I've been
Yeah.
very impressed.
Yeah.
So
And then it's just like beyond that, realizing that when they go to school, they're on a different filter system. When they are at a friend's
mhm.
house, it's not definitely not an end all be all safeguard. But so I actually do keep like I have a free printable. It's called the 10 tips and tricks for parenting faith filled kids in the digital age. And so that I'm pretty sure will be in the show notes afterwards. And that's
Yeah.
really just a starter because a lot of it does boil down to the conversational style, taking the driver's ed approach to technology and being intentional in that way. Also, this is a random one, but I'm going to throw it out there because I think it's been
Yeah.
super helpful for us. And I really toyed with, is this really helpful? Is this just a band-aid? Is this actually making things worse? Or maybe it's a good indicator that my kids can't handle what we've given them. But we use a lockbox, and a lot of parents, when I talk about it, they're like, send me the link on Amazon for that. Like, I should start getting commission on that because
Yeah.
I recommend it a lot. And I was talking just like in a voice text to a fellow mom who asked for it. And I was just talking myself through what I thought about it. And I realized for me, it actually, I feel like it teaches our kids a really good tool, actually. So, yes, our kids and us, we're all prone to addiction. And I just gave a talk last week to my own kids' youth group and shared with them all the science behind the dopamine hits and what technology does to your brain and how the big tech companies know how to capitalize on how your brain works, all of those things. And it's not age specific. We all can go down that path. but it's especially something that our young people are most prone to because their brains are still so young and developing. And we've probably all experienced that child who just got asked to be done with their device. It's time to be done. And it's like a rage, right? It's
Oh,
like
yeah.
out, like, what just happened to my child? And
Hence why
part
I
of
had
it,
to tell my child when the mom group was happening, "Don't come down and act like a turd." Because I did not expect him to go, "Oh, let me turn my game off. Thank you, mother, for the 2 hours that I got on my gaming system. I'm gonna come down now and fold the laundry." No, I knew exactly what was gonna happen whenever I said, "Get off of your gaming," when he wasn't ready to get off. He was probably gonna come down, him-hawing and complaining about, "Oh, I was in the middle of this or that." And I was like, "I still have people here. I
yeah,
please try not to be a turd." So,
yeah.
I completely understand. Keep
Yes.
going. I'm sorry, I
They
had to
I
interject.
mean, they lose their minds, right? And gratitude
Yeah.
goes out the window, and so we use it's like a clear box, and it just has a little lock code, just like a locker would have, and we put it's big enough for an iPad. It's also big enough for not just phones, but obviously you can't put a TV in there, but you can't put the TV remote in there. You just have to
Mhm.
convince your kids not to learn how to use their phones as remotes, which has happened in my house, so that complicates
They're
things.
so savvy. They are
Yeah.
so
I'm like, "I
savvy.
didn't even teach you how to do that," but maybe my husband did. But what I appreciate about the lockbox is it does take away a little bit of the fight because so much of the issue is I can go to bed feeling really guilty about how I parented that day because I'm frustrated. Then I feel guilty about how I handled it. And it just really, instead of building that connection, it's tearing it down. And it's like, why over technology? This is not worth it. And I can
Mhm.
just hate that. I hate that's what it's doing to our family. And so something that the lockbox has done is it removes it from being, oh, mom said no, to you can see the device in this clear plastic box, but it's not accessible. And it takes away the back and forth, the nagging. But now it's just, oh, it's in the lockbox. I can put my phone in there when I'm tempted to doom scroll and I need to be done for the night. It also has holes in it for charging your phone at night, so it's a great place to store it. And when I was talking to this fellow mom of, really, do I feel like I'm just basically saying I've succumbed and my kids are addicted and have to have their things in a lockbox? Because honestly, I would find so many hiding places in the house. Oh, under the clothes, on my top shelf in my closet or in the random drawer in the kitchen, like hiding things. Ran out of hiding places because they would find it and it felt so disobedient. But I realized that they really need a break from their tech and they also need to have parameters around like how often they're doing technology, having screen time Sabbaths, which we're still navigating and figuring out the best way to do that. But what I realized is I feel like it's actually teaching them a really great life lesson that when it's no different than when we teach our kids how to date and how to have boundaries. If you know that it's going to be tempting to watch a movie on that couch solo with your boyfriend, maybe you should choose to do something else. Or if
Mhm.
someone is on a diet and they just keep cake in their fridge, obviously we've all heard that metaphor. And so it's no different with what can we all do to set ourselves up and to have tools in place when we know that we don't have good self-control. It's not just,
Mhm.
oh, keep having better self-control, like, maybe I'll do it right next time. It's no, set up the tools, set up those what is it? Like a fence, like guideposts, whatever, to
Yeah.
just to cause ourselves to step back and say, "Nope, now is not the time. Now is not the time
Mhm.
for my device privilege." That's been a really helpful one and has kind of mitigated the level of fighting that happens between parent and child in our household. And like I
Mhm.
said, there's a lot more on that freebie in the show notes.
Yeah, I will definitely be linking that. And I agree with you. And it's sometimes it just takes the pattern of, hey, the phone comes down and into our room at this time. And that's what we had started with our son. The phone comes down, it needs to be on the charger in our room at this time. And sometimes it may be later or whatever. We're not like super, it must be on this time, but it's become a habit now, and so now even, there's been a lot of times that he's heading up to bed, and if I forget, "Hey, did you put your phone?" or whatever, he'll get all the way up to his room, and then he'll be like he'll come out of his room, and I'll be like, "What are you doing? I thought you went to bed." And he, "It was in my pocket. Here you go. I'm setting it on the stairs." And so I think when you start developing that pattern, like you said, of, "Hey, we're putting everything in the lockbox, and we're gonna go to bed," then it may be a little bit of a fight at the beginning, but then it becomes the expectation.
Mhm.
and there's really no questioning. And then the lockbox is the bad guy, right? I can't get my phone. The lockbox is the bad guy. And this is just an expectation in the home. And look, I don't think that this is not just about phones. I actually watched you on an Instagram live with a guy, and I don't remember his name. It may have been Chris, the guy you were referencing earlier. You can correct me if not, but he was talking about video games.
Mhm.
And that's a big one in our home. It's a huge one with our 12-year-old. But what's interesting is that my 25-year-old, when he was younger, was also a big gamer and loved video games. And so finding that balance has been a challenge of how many hours is acceptable. And then doing what you said, having some screen sabbatical. The technology companies are clearly much smarter than us, and they're
Yeah,
training all of us to be our master, right? And we've got to retrain ourselves, and then in the process of retraining ourselves, educate our children on
definitely.
how to do it better, because it's not going anywhere. It's not like Apple is gonna go, "You know what? We think we've really done society dirty here, and we're gonna pull back all of this technology." No,
Yeah,
it's just gonna
although
get
you will find those execs who are now doing other things and fighting against the things that I just did some research that the man who created the doom scroll, basically, he is now leading like the Center for Ethical Technology Practices because he realized the thing he created was actually detrimental to society. And it was funny, you were talking about the video games. I was like, my other choice of what to put in the help fill in the blank was help. I feel like I've lost my son to Fortnite. Because
yes.
that was probably the start of the frustration for me is, like, realizing and just all you p parents listening, if you feel overwhelmed, know that I have not done this well at all, and that might be why I'm writing the book and why I'm talking to moms groups because 'cause I'm like, "Man, really should I have introduced Fortnite at 8 years old?" I look back and I'm like, "That might not have been my best decision," and in
Mhm.
some ways, I regret it, but I can't go back, and I can only go forward. And where do we find the happy medium and where do we find where to go from here so that our kids so they have a great relationship with us and ultimately grow to know and love Jesus. That's what it boils down to. I know you were going to ask about what am I praying for right now, and that really is it. There's a verse that's actually my verse of the year this year, and the word that came to me for the year is abundance. And I know a lot of people, when you think of that word, you're like, oh, I'm sure it's John 10:10, right? Like he's given us life and life to the full, life abundantly. And that's true. But I'm a little bit more a realist than an optimist. And so the verse that just kept coming to me over and over again, and I realized that it's not just for my life, but I was like, this is really applicable to parenting in the digital age. And it says in Second Peter 1:3, his divine power has given us everything we need for life and godliness through his knowledge of him who called us by his own glory and get goodness. He's given us everything we need, right? We have abundance because through knowing him, we have everything we need for life and godliness. And so if you feel frustrated, if you feel at your wits' end, like, I don't have time to look up all these how to's, there actually are some really easy how to's for some of these things out there that just know that God is right there beside you and he will walk with you hand in hand. And my prayer is that he'll give us the knowledge to parent intentionally and show up with wisdom, but also then that our kids will not be so distracted that they can't develop a life of faith. That would be if at the end of the day, if I get to the end of the road and I would never want it to be because I allowed too much technology that my kids didn't come to know the Lord, right? That would be on me.
Yeah.
And that's where the whole idol conversation comes into play. And I tell my kids that I still have to answer to God. And so at the end of the day, I feel like our relationship with technology is not in a healthy balance. Then it's on me to help you get it to where it needs to be so that you
Mhm.
can have the full, rich life, adventurous life that God offers us. And
Right.
it's largely lived outside of a screen. And screens
Mhm.
are just a tool that helps
Yeah.
us communicate with others.
I agree with you. I love that your message is be aware, do the research for yourself, make sure you're ready to participate in the safeguards that are required for your children to have the technology. I really love that you're saying it's not too late. Even if you've done it and you can pull back, you can make adjustments. Communication is key. So many um nuggets of wisdom there for us to hone in on and to understand that, like what you just said, at the end of the day, are we allowing space for our children to know and love Jesus and to have faith in him, um, and know how to navigate what's coming to them? If they're not learning that, then when they do end up on a site, or if a friend is sitting next to them in lunch, like, we want our children to be prepared with the tools to say, hey, you know what, guys, this isn't great. We want them to have that discernment. And that's only going to come from us being able to say, hey, you know what, guys, this isn't great. Or even admitting when we didn't do it great. We didn't do it great. And I love the prayer also. And I pray this a lot. My kids are probably like, could you please quit asking God for that? Expose them, Lord. If something is happening, or they're doing something that's unsafe, or they're in a situation that is not healthy, expose it to me. Whether it's through a friend, a situation, something that pops up on your phone, whatever it is, expose it so that we can get to the root of it and we can get through it. So anyway, I so appreciate your time and in all of this knowledge. I think it's going to be so beneficial to those of us that are in the thick of this. And how do we get through it? Thank you so much, Jenna.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me. And I'm writing that prayer down. I didn't have that one, but thanks.
Dear Lord, I need you to be a tattletale. How about that? Thanks so much for listening to The Mom Show with Courtney Doyle. Remember to check the show notes for any links, books, or resources that are mentioned in each episode. We want to be sure this blesses other mothers. And in order to do this, if you're listening via podcast, be sure that you like and share. If you could write a review, that would be fantastic. It helps us get in front of other moms. If you're watching via YouTube, be sure to hit that subscribe button. This way, you won't ever miss an episode. We want to make sure that we increase our reach to other mothers who need a little encouragement, a community, and a whole lot of Jesus. We're so glad you're here.